It's telling us that in our test not found handling, the argument 1 passed to the construct needs to be an instance of URL matcher, but it was actually given an instance of URL matcher interface. And this even tells us where the error occurred, on line 30. So what's the problem? Well, let's open up framework test.php and take a look at line 30. I'm going to go back to our examples and open framework test. And we have down here at line 30, we have return new framework matcher resolver. Now the matcher is being set here, and we're using a get mock method, and then we're passing an interface, URL matcher interface. Now we talked a little bit about interfaces before, but just to recap, the idea of an interface is that it provides us with a base class that has the methods defined that we expect anything inheriting from it to also have, but it doesn't have any of the functionality within it. It's basically like a skeleton for how classes that inherit from it should behave. So if we had a cheese grater interface, for example, one of the methods might be grate. And in our interface, we should say that any cheese grater needs to implement that grate method. Now, on the one hand, this provides us with useful scaffolding. It's something explicit that says anything that falls within this category should have these methods. And that's just good for organization. But where interfaces really shine is when it comes to creating mock objects. So the idea here is that we don't necessarily want to use URL matcher directly inside of our tests. We don't want to depend on any of the code inside of there because that just makes whatever we're testing a little bit harder to test because we don't know if the problem is with the thing that we're testing or with the class that's being used inside of it. An interface, though, provides us with a structure of methods. It defines all the methods, so we can pass an instance of that interface into whatever it is that we're unit testing and not have to worry about the actual code. But we don't get errors that say that certain methods haven't been defined, for example. Just for kicks, let's take a look at URL matcher interface. So I'm going to copy this and go to my Finder, and I'm going to search for URL matcher interface inside of our examples folder, and I'll open this up in the editor. So as you can see here, there's no actual code that does anything. We have our interface defined as URL matcher interface, and we have our method that's used within this interface, match. This method doesn't do anything, it just is defined, so we can use this as kind of a placeholder anytime we want to use URL matcher inside of a test. Now, just in case this is twisting your brain in knots a bit, it took me a while to wrap my mind around the whole idea of interfaces and testing. If you haven't integrated testing with your projects before, then this seems like a lot of complexity that's not necessarily needed. Now, instead of just one class, we have a class that inherits from another class that's an interface that doesn't actually do anything except define the methods that are expected to be used by anything that inherits it. And the main reason we're doing this is so that we can test anything that depends on this main class for its functionality. It's tricky stuff, but at some point it'll gel and you'll understand what's going on here. Okay, so back in our test. Now when we say get mock, what we're doing is creating an instance of this interface, basically. Now we won't go into detail about these next lines, but this is basically helping set up expectations for how this matcher mock object is going to work. Finally, we create a resolver, and now we have two mock objects we can then send to framework.